What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Runners HQ. Today we have a little bit of discussion and some new information that's come out about Bungie and this recent news of them stealing artwork. They fully admitted to it, and it seems like they're committed to making it right, but it seems like it might be a little bit too late for the community. That being said, they streamed for about an hour and they talked all kinds of things about Marathon outside of that artwork. So let's go through all the biggest things that I've noticed. All right, let's go. First and foremost, if you don't know about the art situation, there was a person on Twitter that came out and said that Bungie basically stole a bunch of assets that they designed like almost 10 years ago. And it turns out that a lot of these assets made it into the alpha version of the game. And this is actually true. This actually happened. Bungie used those things in the game and somehow it made it past all of the checks. And in this stream that they just did today, Joe Cross actually said that these things made it past different checks. They were inspired by, they were put on an inspiration board and then somehow made it past like the design checking situation, and they found their way into the game. It was almost like the artwork kind of slipped through the cracks and they didn't realize that it was just inspiration art, but then was used for actual art in the game. It's like someone had the design as an inspo in one hand, but like kind of put it on the wrong pile of paper, so to speak. Obviously, this is a huge mistake because this is going to garner a ton of negative publicity for the game, for Bungie, for Destiny, for literally everything. And there's lots of reports and lots of talk about this not being the only time that this has happened. So this is definitely a huge issue, and I'm really glad that they started this stream off with Joe Cross apologizing about this mistake and talking about the things that they're going to do to make it better. So that's how this started out. Now, obviously, if you want to dig into it a little bit more, you can. There's lots of videos on the internet that can talk about the situation in depth. But from my perspective, it seems like Bungie is responding in an okay way. They are trying to make it right. And Joe Cross himself even said that he'd be willing to work with this person, basically hire them or work with them on their artwork, because they obviously share a similarity in terms of what they like for like typography and art design, graphic design. So he absolutely said they are in talks with this artist and they're willing to work something out. So that being said, let's get on to the news about Marathon and things that they've sort of talked about in this dev session. Now, I've got the background footage of the session, but to be honest with you, this was like really 95% audio. They didn't really show anything, and they made a choice not to show anything based on what happened yesterday with the art and the accusations around stealing of assets. They said that they are currently going to go through and completely comb through all of their assets, look at all of their graphic design, and make sure that there's not any more cases of this happening. They're really trying to just save the headache of having the same thing pop up again. That being said, they just didn't show anything. It was just Joe Ziegler and Joe Cross on screen the entire time. The other voices that were on the video were actually Lars Bakken and Witz. They were both just kind of off frame. And then there was like one other person that was in charge of doing the Twitch chat. So anyways, let's get into some of the things they talked about with Marathon. This session was all about what they learned from the alpha and what they're going to be changing going forward. And there were some pretty big notes that they talked about. A lot of it was around the pacing of the game, the feeling of danger, and how difficult the game was. There was a lot of feedback in the alpha, how the game just didn't feel that difficult. And I would actually echo those sentiments. I think the game really didn't feel that difficult. I never really feared for my life. I never really thought there was a moment there where, you know, the world itself was going to have a problem with me being there. And they talk a lot about how the world is supposed to be unforgiving. It's supposed to be sort of like, you're not supposed to feel welcome in this environment. And so in this stream, they talked a lot about that. They really want the world to feel a little bit more dangerous. And there's a lot of areas that they need to improve on in order to make that happen. One of those is like your materials usage, like things like, you know, health is like really easy to come by in the alpha. There was lots of health kits, there's lots of healing going on. Fights would last a long time, and that really wasn't their intention. So they're actually going to be dialing back the number of health items that you can find in the world, the number of consumables in the world, because they feel like it was just a little bit too much. The same thing with ammo. They're really going to be rebalancing all of the like consumables and materials and ammo. They felt like there was way too much of it. Too many guns, too much ammo, too much health. And that led to just sort of you just feeling like you could either loot, and then your life was really only in danger if you ran into another squad and you had a fear of the players. And they want it to be more about the environment than the actual players themselves. So that's what they're making adjustments on. They're making adjustments to those categories of things. Now, the other big note is that they saw a lot of people solo queuing, whether it was with crew fill on or crew fill off. Solo queuing was really heavy compared to what they expected, and that actually sends a strong signal, and that is that the crew system is just not good enough. And most of that stems from the fact that there's really no way to effectively communicate with your crew members outside of a prox chat that's obviously missing from the game. So what they're trying to do is solve the proximity chat equation. They don't know if that'll be for launch, but in the meantime, for launch, they really want to dial in all of their communication features, like the communication, like comms wheel, the pinging system. They really expressed their displeasure with the status of the pinging system. They thought it could be much more well-rounded. They really want communication and crew play to be possible, whether you're solo queuing or if you're in a party. They want that crew play to exist. This is what they've designed all of the gunfighting and all of the gameplay around, for the runners, the various ways that the runners can work together and their various abilities. And if people are preferring to go solo because they just really don't have the ability to communicate with their team, that is a problem. And I even noticed myself, I often queued in a duo squad, and then we'd have crew fill for the last person. We almost never had communication with that person, whether it was a mic or any type of pinging or any of that. Like it was really bad. There were a lot of solo players that just weren't willing to communicate, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the game doesn't facilitate it easily enough. They also talked about progression on the factions. They thought it was way too fast. A lot of the players ran through the progression in just a few hours, and that is something that they are definitely looking to change. They don't want the progression to be so fast. They want you to have to earn those things. But personally, I don't think the progression itself was really the issue. I think the major issue was actually the fact that the world felt a little bit too easy, and you never really felt in danger. So you were able to complete these progression elements really quickly because you weren't really afraid to run from one location to the other. There were a lot of contracts that made you go from like the north side of the map all the way down to the south side. You had to scan something here, then go all the way to the other one and scan something there. And under normal circumstances, if this game was like super dangerous, you could go to the north side of the map, scan that thing, and then the trek to get to the south side of the map was really going to be a risk that you may not want to take at that time. So they talked a lot about that. They want this world to feel dangerous, and they feel like progression is sort of tied to that. But they're also going to be adjusting a lot of the contracts. They feel like the contracts didn't really represent the factions very well in terms of what they wanted or their materials or the types of contracts that they were asking for. So the contracts team is really working hard to sort of, you know, really provide an identity for those contracts for each of those factions. Now, they also talked about changing the way exfilling works. Now, they didn't say specifically what they want to do, but they did say that they want to make it a little bit more difficult as time goes on in the session. And in addition to that, as time goes on in the session, they want the game to feel even more dangerous, like they want the world to feel more dangerous. The reason is because as the time goes on in the session, people exfil. Some people just go in, they do one thing, they exfil, and they're done. And that leaves less opportunity for PvP situations. So in that case, as the time goes on, there should be heavier and heavier AI enforcements, a heavier feeling to the world. It should always present this feeling of like, I need to get out, or maybe should I go for that one last thing? Should I loot this one last location or complete this one last event? Or maybe not, because I know it's just going to get harder and harder. So they're talking about like the lethality of the bots, or the, you know, the way that the world feels as time goes on. They want to ramp up that tension towards the end of the match. And what they saw in the alpha was that a lot of players sort of relaxed as the time went on. Like the game felt easier as the time went on, and that's sort of antithetical to what this game mode actually is. So they're going to be switching that equation quite a bit. Now, Lars also talked about the evolution of the maps, and then Ziegler sort of chimed in with talking about the evolution of the AI. They really have a keen sense on what they want to present this game as in the beginning and how they want to move it forward. So these guys are thinking like way farther out in the future. And when the fans ask these questions, like say, you know, are the 4 going to be in the game? Joe Ziegler wants to say yes. The problem is they're not going to be in the game at launch. Like they have plans for this. And I think this is sort of part of the content plans or the content strategy of the game. And then Lars is talking about the map and how they want it to evolve over time, and that's also part of the content strategy. So like, you know, season 1, you're gonna see like basic robots, blah blah blah, then the story is going to evolve, and then maybe you see a 4 invasion, and then that triggers some things that change within the map. And so that's all part of like the long-term strategy of the game. And I know people are going to be disappointed when they hear that like maybe the 4 are not going to be in the game at launch, but it does not take them away from the universe. I think everyone that's involved in the project really understands the lore behind it, and they understand the significance and importance of these various alien races. And I think they have lots of opportunity, lots of story background to pull from when it comes to creating content for it and story content for it. So I'm excited to see where they go with it, but I think at launch we're going to be getting sort of like the foundation of what the game is supposed to be, original story that goes with it, and it just sets the table for everything that can happen after that. Now, Joe Cross actually chimed in a couple of times. He talked about fidelity improvements. There's a lot that's on the table. Like, this was an alpha. He just kind of reiterated that everything is going to look better. The external environments will be looking better. The textures will all be looking better. The vegetation is going to look better. There's a lot of things that they've already done that the game looks a lot better now in the build that they're current, like their current build, not what we played, but their current build looks a lot better than what we actually got to see because we were playing on an older build and that stuff really wasn't super necessary at the time. He also talked about the team working on the art for all of the runner fashion, as he called it. They're really going to lean in, I think, on some of the customization options, but they're really cautious. They don't want to change the character models. So I think I've said this before, but there's probably going to be character skins where you can't really change the overall look of the character so that it doesn't look like that particular runner. They're still going to have the shape, the overall look of that runner, but it might just be stylized in a way that it maybe suits your taste a little more than the base version of them. And lastly, they're really focusing on TTK and just balancing overall. And when I say balancing overall, I mean literally overall. Balancing the guns, balancing the materials, balancing the consumables, balancing the pacing of the game, balancing everything. They are still balancing, and they playtest the game constantly. So this is something that I think we will have to wait and see how it goes. I'm going to be really excited to try the beta out, because when that actually gets here, when it's time to actually play a beta version of this, I think they're going to be at a point where they're going to offer it to a bigger scale of people. We're going to have a lot more people playing, and we can really get an idea of how the pacing of this game is going to be. And we're going to really get an idea of the true balance in this game, what they are designing this experience to feel like. It's very clear to me that they were not super happy with the way our experience went. Like, they thought there was too many consumables, too many guns. It wasn't dangerous enough unless you got into a PvP situation, and they really don't want that to be the case. They want Tau Ceti to feel like you're not welcome here, and you should be wanting to leave at any moment. And you have to constantly make this choice of, do I continue trying to get that other thing, or do I just get out with what I have now and save it and try to go for another run? So to me, it's very clear they understand where the game is at. They didn't really speak about public criticism. They didn't really speak about public feedback, which has been primarily negative at this point. And the timing of all of this art stuff really couldn't have been worse, because the alpha itself got a lot of negative feedback on the internet, and then you had Arc Raiders that came out, and that got a lot of positive feedback. And so the contrast of that shined a light on all of the negative feedback for the game. And then of course they go to show us some things today, and all of a sudden they can't, because the day before we have this art issue where there's been some stealing of art, and that's just super unfortunate for the team. Are they going to recover? Probably, but I just don't think it's going to be soon. Like, this negativity towards Bungie feels like it's deep rooted, and I don't know what they're going to do in order to get out of it. I also don't think that they necessarily think it's warranted, and I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not on one side or the other. All I want to do is provide marathon content, and that's what I'm going to do. But I feel like there's this definite divide between the people who've played the game and actually appreciate it for what it is, and the people who maybe didn't get a chance to play the alpha, or potentially played it but like didn't get a good experience out of it, and the people that don't like the game. Like, it's okay not to like the game. It's okay to like Arc Raiders better. It's okay to like the game, and it's okay to like both games in general. But why are we pitting these two games against each other as a community? Like, we should be rooting for both of them, because more good games is better than less. And I just don't understand why people, if they don't like the game, they have to try to convince other people that do like the game that they shouldn't like the game. Anyways, I went off on a weird tangent here, but the point I'm trying to say is Bungie has an uphill battle going into launch, because they really need to get the public on their side in order to sell this game. And I just don't think it is right now. Like, they really have a tough battle ahead of them, a tough road ahead of them. And I really wish them a lot of luck. And that's not because I'm a Bungie sympathizer or something like that. I genuinely am an optimistic, happier person. So anyways, it is what it is. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch you on the next one. Happy running.